Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. How does one go about transforming society? What kind of smarts or intelligence can we employ on a personal and national level? Judy Joseph McSween is a timeout specialist who says we take time out not because we can afford to, but because we realize that it is critical for performing at our fullest potential. She joins us now to discuss conversational intelligence in societal transformation. How you doing, ma'am? You all right?
I am good, and welcome to all our listeners.
Thank you so much for making the time. And I want to start off, let's get an idea of the parameters that we're working with. So I'll ask you for a practical, livable definition rather of transformation.
Transformation is that ability to bring about sustainable change, I would say, in a situation. And those situations can vary. And usually when we talk about it recognizing that there's a behavioral element to transformation. And unless that element is addressed, the transformation is not complete and it's not sustainable.
And I like how you say that, because sometimes it reminds me of individuals saying, okay, you've apologized, but your actions have not changed. So is that really an apology, or is that a bit of manipulation, a placebo effect to get back in good graces? And that kind of takes me to the point of something that I saw that you would have written in terms of transitioning knowledge to being and doing. Because like that apology, okay, we know we've done something wrong, and is there theoretically we've acknowledged that, but how do we be and how do we do, how do we live that apology? So in terms of that transition, what are some of those things that are necessary?
So the first of all is the awareness, and that comes through knowledge, and it can, depending on what we're talking about, knowledge comes in different ways. We have 5 senses through which it comes. We also have the 6th sense, the intuition, by which knowledge can also come. But having gotten that knowledge and having gotten that awareness, what do we do with it? Sometimes it remains in the brain as a library. Most of it does. But the transformation comes when we internalize that information and introspect on that information and identify how it could influence, what are the choices it presents, in terms of what I do next. And then we make the choice. The choice may not be the best choice, but we are aware as to what the choices are. And then our action emanates from that being that we selected to go with. So I like to call it marinating the knowledge.
Yeah, and let me go somewhere a little bit and then unfold in a way that takes us all forward, hopefully. But with that though, and that transition, because we're talking about transitioning, we're talking about knowledge, transitioning to being and doing, personal transformation to societal transformation. Is it the same thing? Are there similar characteristics that we can scale up? How do we start to do some of those things?
So the society consists of individuals. And therefore, if we're going to transition a society, transform a society, we have to start with self. And in this current reality that we live in, it's the recognition that we are on a Ferris wheel, so to speak, and we are so busy, so we don't necessarily pause to identify the impact we are having, the impact others are having, and where we may need to change. So it initially begins with the individual pausing and assessing the reality. And if we were to look at our society right now, if we were to take that pause and we examine our nation is currently engaged in a number of conversations. And the quality of those conversations is what I would call unhealthy. So there is a lot of blaming, there is a lot of anger, there is a lot of demeaning, Just before we came on, I was reviewing Paula May Weeks, her speech when she was inaugurated as president, and she described the language in Parliament as vitriolic. And that's at a leadership level. The other thing is recognizing that because of social media, we all now have access to a platform to verbalize whatever we want. And we don't necessarily pause before we verbalize. So somebody says something, we respond to it, and there's that toing and froing in not the best of language. So, like I said, it all begins with a pause and being able to appreciate the impact that we have experienced and the impact that we are about to have on others. You know, our motto, our national motto is together we aspire, together we achieve. And if we start with those words, those are rich words that speak to a nation that recognizes the need to collaborate. So that's the knowledge that's presented to us, that we need to collaborate. But the words that we use and our daily interactions doesn't suggest a society that is in fact taking that knowledge, marinating it, as I said earlier on, and then living out of that. And so it's the recognition that the words we speak have an impact on emotions, and emotions have an impact on the way that we speak. And so I correlate what I call conversational intelligence, or not what I call, but the science of conversational intelligence to emotional intelligence. If we were to look at the scripture, if we were to look at religious traditions, in each religious tradition, there is a reference to the power of words. So in the Bible, you'll see references to the fact that, you know, the tongue has the power on life of death. If you were to look in the Quran, there's reference to the fact that it's probably better to speak. You either speak good or you be silent. The Gita also makes references to the austerity of speech, saying that you shouldn't lie, you shouldn't gossip, etc. In Buddhism, they speak about the fact, the importance of the quality of your conversations, all in recognition that the quality of our conversations influences behavior. So when you see this society as ours, living out of fear, living out of anxiety, living stressfully, living with anger, having those vitriolic conversations, appreciating is that the words that we are using are influencing that. And that's at a religious, from a religious background. If we were to look at it from a scientific background, two references I would make, and one would be the work of Masaru Emoto, who did work on water, the hidden message of water. And in his work, what he did is he looked at water, pure water, crystallized, and he spoke about the fact that it looked so much like a snowflake. It was so beautiful. He said, but polluted water crystallizes in a different way. And then he tried an experiment where he put water in a vial, pure water in a vial, and allowed it to freeze over 24 hours. And on the vial, he put positive words, you know, peace, joy, etc. And he says, when it froze, you got these beautiful crystals again. But the vial that had the water with words like ugly and angry and I hate you and that, when it froze into these gray, clumsy looking clumps. And I share that in recognition that we are 70% water. And if it is that words are influencing the water in the vial to that extent, what is the impact then when we speak to each other? The neuroscientific research, on the other hand, has also demonstrated that when we speak, there is an actual changing in the brain. There are some kinds of conversation that cause the secretion of, or the triggering of the amygdala, which secretes those cortisol, testosterone, that puts us into a defensive mode, an aggressive mode, a mode in which we want to just run away, fight, flight, or freeze. And then there are other conversations that stimulate the prefrontal cortex, producing oxytocin, bonding hormones, dopamine, the joyful hormones that puts us into another mood. And so, Dike, if you were to reflect on your conversations with individuals, you'd probably be able to identify that depending on the topic of the conversation or who you're speaking to, the words being used, that it actually changes the energy within you. It has the ability to do that.
And one of those things that I wonder sometimes, especially with the work done by Masaru Emoto, is how much of it is the energy of the word being put onto the glass, and how much of it is the energy of the perception of the person putting that word onto the glass. So how much energy do I inject into the thing that I've put onto the water that will remember and record this? But this is a conversation we continue when we reach on the other side. We're speaking with timeout specialists. I like the fact that you use the word pause. You didn't say timeout. Judy, Joseph McSween, stay with us. We return with more. Welcome back. We are speaking about conversational intelligence and societal transformation. We're doing so with timeout specialist Judy, Joseph McSween. And that conversation, that dialogue engagement, it almost always encompasses elements of power dynamics, in the sense that it could be between persons, it can be what someone has in their mind already, even before entering conversation with someone. How does an individual employ conversational intelligence, especially if sometimes what you see is needed at that moment is very different from what resonates with you? I prefer hit them the stick than the carrot, or I'm just so used to trying to entice people, show them that carrot, versus being a little stronger, a little more assertive. How do we find something a lot closer to that golden mean?
So you hit the nail on the head when you started off by saying that you come into the conversation with things in you. And so, I like I said earlier on, the intelligences are correlated: the conversational intelligence, the emotional intelligence, the spiritual intelligence, the IQ, the intellectual intelligence. So the pause becomes a critical part of the conversational intelligence. So as I'm about to meet with you, as I'm about to face the media, what is going on inside of me? What are the anxieties? What are the concerns? What are the biases? What are the judgments? And so when I become self-aware of those things, it's the recognition that any of those things that I identified there impact how we think and how we behave. And so it has to be very intentional. In this conversation, in this dialogue, is my intent to build a relationship? Is my intention to reach a resolution? Is my intention to co-create with the other person? Is my intention to collaborate with the other person? And that will determine whether I use the big stick or not. And, a practice we have is we tend to like to tell people things, to direct people. And there is seldom adequate curiosity about the other. And the curiosity about the other is demonstrated by asking questions, and it's demonstrated by attentive listening to the response. So that's the way we need to enter the conversation. creating a space where the person feels comfortable, the person feels they can trust us. Because, as you say, and when you enter a space, you can feel the energy of the other. So I can feel if you are going to be aggressive, or if you're a bit closed. All right. So how do I create a space where I develop trust? And then recognizing that throughout the conversation, I need to keep focusing on the trust, because I could start off a conversation where everybody's, yes, this sounds like it's going to be a good meeting. And then I say something along the way, or somebody says something along the way that changes the dynamics. So we need to be aware that trust is something that we need to monitor. It's not I've built trust and it's punto final. Anything we say could affect that quality of trust that we have with the other.
And I really appreciate that that level, trying to keep that level of curiosity and looking at trust as a process rather than, okay, well, it's a done deal and we've arrived at that destination. Because I think sometimes it can also feel as though you kind of die into self if you are not, I guess, possibly comfortable enough within yourself to say, okay, well, let me listen to what this person has to say so that we can achieve some desired outcome. And it's a matter, to me, it's a matter of respecting self, but at the same time working towards betterment of a larger group so that you get that win-win. How does that jive with what it is you're sharing at this point in time?
So definitely, because when trust is low, the focus is on self and protecting self. When trust is high, the quality of listening is better, and we're more focused on moving towards collaboration. We're more focused on exchanging perspectives and being open to being influenced by what we hear. So, sometimes we go in with a perspective and we expect to leave with that perspective and have sold that perspective to everyone. Building relationships is about recognizing people have other perspectives, listening to it, and being open to having your perspective adjusted based on what you've heard.
Are there different applications for conversational intelligence? And I say that looking at the website that you have, or your website rather, we could say that a lot more efficiently, but effective performance management, managing conflict. What are some of the applications for conversational intelligence?
So you just named them there in terms of performance management. So performance management is one of those situations where people go in with a level of fear and anxiety. Both the person conducting the performance management and the person who is the subject of the performance management. And so that trust that I spoke about as we start is important to, have each other feeling at ease, and it could happen, by starting the conversation by asking what might be some of the anxieties that you have as you come into this conversation. And as the person conducting it, saying, that I am uncomfortable with this as well. So acknowledging that we both are experiencing discomfort. Clarity as to where we want the conversation to go is very important, because sometimes we sit in a conversation, we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're on two different highways. And so being able to identify clearly what is the outcome that we want from the particular conversation. Conflict is another one of those things where situations where conversational intelligence is critical. Again, conflict, we go into conflict wanting to come out with what we went in with. And this is where I talk about, the collaboration, what it is you want, what is non-negotiable, what is non-negotiable, what is my expectation, what is non-negotiable, and how can we collaborate to reach the end, the desired outcome, with our expectations being met. Conflicts take many different forms, and through demonstrating the curiosity, we can clearly identify what the core issue is. So if I were to go back to that performance management issue, you may have a manager who's really upset with the perceived underperformance of the worker and is adamant that, you must come up to scratch. But if we were to apply the conversational intelligence techniques, then we may discover the why of the underperformance. And the underperformance might be simple. There might be something technical that the person doesn't have a grasp on, but the environment hasn't presented itself as being safe to express it. So we go back to the importance of trust again. So that's another issue.
But that level of safety brings me to my final question. We have about 1.5 minutes. Can conversational intelligence be improved over time? Because sometimes you find someone who, yes, you've spoken about transformation starting from within, but when you have individuals who are at the helm of organizations, really influencing policy, and people get an idea of, cool, this is what the culture is of the agency or the body, and they're getting it from that person at the helm. If that person has a manner that doesn't really pay that much credence to conversational intelligence, and there's that trickle-down effect, where does that leave us? So is this something that can be changed? Is this something that we can get better at, and sometimes quickly?
Like emotional intelligence, conversational intelligence is a competency that can be developed, but the organization must be prepared to take a time out and explore the impact that their conversations are having, much like our society.
And definitely, I think this is a good point for us to pause and hopefully reschedule for another one, because naturally you can't plumb the depths of a conversation like this in the time that we had. But we want to thank you for the time that you've spent with us, Judy Joseph McSween, a Time Out Specialist. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.